Can I have a show of hands of who was not here? If this is your first time here, can I have a show of hands? Okay. Anybody younger than 15? You're the youngest one in the room? Okay, let's start. Describe the man you want to marry, the perfect husband. Yeah, you guys could, I'll be brutally honest. What do you want? Tall, dark, rich. Come on, just say it. Tall, rich, good looking. What else? How much? What? Smart? Okay. Athletic. Calm down, people. Okay. Now let anybody who's been married more than 20 years. Okay, let's ask them. No, what characteristics are more important to you now? Women only. Okay, what else? Kind. See, as you get older, other things start to become more important. What else? Caring. Loving. Patient. Supportive. Unconditional love. Loyal. Loyalty. Honest. What about unconditional love? What about a defender? You want a wimp, or do you want a semi-Israeli kind of guy? Huh?
I got a defender.
You want a defender, right? Yeah, he's got to have some umph in him, right? Defender. Okay, now let's talk about a total. Let's talk about a dad. Girls, anybody younger than 20? Give me characteristics of the perfect dad. Just shout them out when you know.
Loving, patient.
Loving, got it. Patient, got it. What else?
Supportive.
Doesn't take away your phone. Supportive, got that one too. Come on. What else? Understanding, we kind of have that one as well. Understanding. Funny. That's part of persevering. Do you guys see a pattern? I'm running out of room.
Humble. It's Corinthians 13. The love is patient, love is kind, love is
Humble. Notice that these two guys are kind of the same guy. You marry the first guy, and then eventually you end up having kids, but you kind of want the same characteristics from both individuals. There's a father and a husband aspect that you know what you want your dad to be, you know what you want your husband to be. We have a map up here that shows the timeline of human history according to the Hebrew scriptures. We go back 6,000 years. Each one of these circles is a millennium of 1,000 years, starting off with the birthday of Adam. 1,000 years later, you have the birthday of Noah. 1,000 years later, you have the birthday of Abraham. 1,000 years later, you have the birthday of David. And 1,000 years later, you have the birthday of Yeshua, Jesus, as we call him in the United States. And we're going to show you that God has been trying to do something with mankind. And our enemy, we call him Satan or the devil or Lucifer, has also been trying to do something with mankind. In general, I put bad things in red and I put good things in blue. So we introduce our characters. In the realm of creation, as we observe it, I broke it down into some kingdoms here: mineral, plant, animal, human, angelic, and divine. The Bible says there's one in the divine kingdom. There's many in the angelic kingdom. There's 3 that are named: Lucifer, Michael, and Gabriel. And it says that Lucifer is 1/3 of the pie. He takes 1/3 of these angels in a rebellion against this being here. Humanity has been left with the choice of who to obey or who to be influenced by, whether it's this red guy or this blue guy. And as of right now, the scriptures say that the road to perdition is wide. That's why most of these are in red. And the road to salvation is narrow. So most human beings are choosing to go against their creator and for this other being, this created angelic being called Lucifer, who's in direct opposition to the divine. In Genesis, the divine creator being opens up with, in the beginning, God created. That's why I put creator. 5 minutes later, the Spirit of God is hovering over the face of the deep. So there's a spirit that is hovering. And then 5 minutes later, there's actually a guy walking around with Adam in the cool of the garden, like he's got a body, and he's communicating with Adam. Now, I put this little 3-ring circle over here as an image to this being, but this being does not like to be depicted by images. He actually prohibits it, as a matter of fact. He likes to be worshipped in spirit and in truth. It is through these things he's trying to mold our character of all of humanity into this list, and that is how we worship this being. This other being over here, let's call him Satan or let's call him Lucifer, he's trying to motivate a rebellion that is going against this Jehovah. He calls himself JHVH. We don't really know how to pronounce it. Some people say Yahweh, some people say Jehovah. The point is that this mysterious being who is one, showing up in 3 diverse ways, and my way of explaining the 3 is like a body, a soul, and a spirit. For example, a plant has a body, but does not have a soul and does not have a spirit. It's alive, but it has no feeling, and it definitely can't sing, it can't create, it can't worship. An animal, in fact, in Italian, we call a soul, we call it an anima. An animal has a soul. It has feelings, it has emotions. You can make your dog wag his tail. You could have an emotional connection with an animal, and he has a body, he has a soul, but it does not have a spirit. There's something missing in an animal that separates him from a human being. And what's missing is the spiritual dimension that the divine and the angelic and the human beings have. We are told that we are made in God's image, so we could actually communicate with God in a physical form, in an emotional form, and in a spiritual form. We are made in his image. It does not mean that we are divine, but it means that the 3 parts that he has is the same 3 parts that we have. So, this divine figure actually appears, according to the Jewish scriptures, he actually appears in different forms of his creation. It's like he downscales his resolution. Sometimes he appears as a whirlwind or a pillar of fire. Sometimes he appeared as a burning bush. Sometimes he appeared as a talking donkey to Balaam. Sometimes he appears as a human being, we think in the form of the Messiah. And sometimes he appears in the form of an angel. He's called the angel of the Lord. These are different formats. He's downgrading himself, even though he does not belong in these realms, but he can pop up in these realms at will. You can go down, but you can't go up. A mineral cannot become a plant. The plant cannot become an animal cannot become a human cannot become an angel, and definitely an angel cannot become a divine creature, which, of course, is what the whole fight is about. Lucifer, in the garden, tells Adam and Eve, you can go up, you can be like God. If you disobey him and you obey me, you can go up a notch. You can be wise, and you could be just like him. You can go up. This whole thing is a competition of going up, and God saying, no, you cannot go up. I have to come down to meet you. You are a finite being. I am infinite. If we want to intersect, if we want to interact, I have to come down to your level. It's like Phil, if he wants to play with his 1-year-old son, he has to go down to his level. The 1-year-old cannot step up to his level. So you have to down. The guy on top has the ability to come down, but not the other way around. So right away we're looking at 2 religions here. One is a God that comes down, and Lucifer is giving mankind the idea that no, you can go up. Now all religions preach this in one form or another. Buddhism or Hinduism, they teach that you can reach nirvana. The Christians say you are going to go up to heaven. The Muslims say the same thing about heaven, and then there's rewards. 72 virgins. The Jews say it's one 72-year-old virgin. We don't want to get quibbled up in the details. Either way, everybody's always on their way up. Give me the 10 names, if you could, on the first 10 names from Adam to Noah. Look at the first 10 people in human history. Adam had a son who 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 had a son. The first 10 guys in Hebrew, look at what their names mean. And now let's read it this way. Man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down. In teaching us, his death shall bring the despairing comfort. This is the biblical religion, God's coming down. All of our religions, I'm going to argue tonight, are telling us exactly the opposite. We are going up. So keep that distinction. So let's go back and fill in all these gaps here. God makes a deal over here. He makes a deal in the first millennium with one man. What happens after 1,000 years or 1,400 years? Mankind doesn't listen to his creator, doesn't listen to his father. He rebels, and the world gets into a degenerative state, and it goes downhill all the way to the point where it gets so evil that God says, I got to flood everything and kill everybody except for 8 people. Starts again with one man named Noah. This time it goes from one man to one family. Tells him the same thing, tries to rewind the contract, makes a new deal. What happens? These people degenerate themselves into a state, and then we end up with the Tower of Babel. God is so unhappy with what's going on here that he stops the construction, breaks up and separates and distributes all these people, says he scatters them throughout the land. If you look at every country, every continent on earth has got a half-built Tower of Babel, because when he distributed us, or when he scattered us, we took this religion and started it all over again. Instead of learning our lesson, we keep doing the same thing, hoping for different results. That's the definition of insanity. And then what do? Abraham gets chosen. Now we go from a man to a family to a tribe. And what happens after 1,000 years? We get stuck in slavery in Egypt. Moses has to bail us out. And even though we get to Israel, we end up with a complete destruction of the tabernacle in Shiloh. Egypt gets... Notice that Satan's building his kingdom at the same time. That's what the red is here. So God's doing a deal with one man, one family, one tribe. Then with David, he tries to do it with one nation, the nation of Israel. Then the message goes out to the New Testament, pushes the message of the New Testament, goes out to some nations. And 1,000 years after that, we have the Dark Ages. This is 1000 AD. And in the last millennium, the millennium that you are in today, this is the end of the 6th millennium, 2019. The Jews call it 5779. Either way, we're a couple hundred years apart. But we're both saying that we are approaching the end of the last millennium. And according to the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., all nations are going to be getting the Word of God by the year 2033, which is exactly 2,000 years from the departure of Yeshua. We told him to leave the planet in 33 A.D. So, Lucifer tries it with the Tower of Babel. This fails. God frustrates his efforts. He tries it again with Egypt and with the Pharaoh. God frustrates these efforts and drowns them all in the Dead Sea. Then he tries it again with these kingdoms. Can you put me the Daniel statue? We have several kingdoms here. I'm calling them Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. This is an image that the prophet Daniel envisioned before any of these kingdoms actually existed. He was in the kingdom of Babylon. And the reason why it's in gold is because all the gold that used to be in Solomon's temple was stolen by the Babylonians and taken out of the land of Israel. So, Israel, I call this Israel 1.0, that gets destroyed in 586 BC. They rebuild under the Medo-Persian Empire, and then Israel 2.0 gets destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. This is modern history. For example, when If you go to the Arch of Titus in Rome, you'll actually see the Roman army carrying the menorah into Rome and carrying all of these artifacts into Rome. So not a lot of disagreement so far. I call it this kingdom 111, I'm Medo-Persia 222, Alexander the Great with Greece at 333, and Rome 1.0, which is the one that destroys Israel in the year 70 AD. Then what happens? Yeshua comes, we told him he's offering a kingdom. We tell him, we're not interested in your kingdom. You could take it with you and go home. So we kick him off the planet, and he comes with a meek, humble, loyal, sacrificial, graceful attitude, and that's not attractive for us. We're looking for a strong man. We're looking for what the kid said at the beginning. Remember, a good, rich, strong dude? And therefore we miss it. So we tell him, don't need you, don't want you. You're not good looking enough. He wasn't good looking here. He definitely wasn't rich. He was born in a manger. Didn't even have a Motel 6 available for him. And the planet as a whole rejects him as the Messiah. Now, Rome 1.0 does not end. The statue that Daniel paints with the feet of iron, these feet turn into feet of iron and feet of clay. But the Roman Empire was never conquered by anybody. The Babylonians were conquered by the Medo-Persians. The Medo-Persians were conquered by Greece. Greece was conquered by Rome, but nobody conquered Rome. This empire kind of just scrambled itself into different countries, such as Eastern and Western Europe. And now what I'm saying, now we get into the prophetic parts where all the arguments come in. What I'm saying is that process is going to undo itself, and these kingdoms are going to start to unite once again. Let's see, Hitler. I labeled Hitler as 555 because he's the last guy who tried to put together a unification of kingdoms of 1,000-year Reich, where he was going to run the whole planet, and everybody's looking for a way to run the planet for 1,000 years. The minute that you see somebody wanting to run the planet for 1,000 years, you start thinking about this millennium that the book of Revelation and Daniel talk about, where you have the true Messiah of the Jews coming and running the planet the way it should be. Now, we say Hitler is 555. We have one more guy to go through. We call him 666. And after that, we get the good guy, which is 777. Now, we're living right here. These things are starting to happen right underneath our eyes. We're starting to have, for the first time, a whole bunch of global problems. Global warming, global terrorism, global immigration, refugee problem, global financial crisis, global environmental problems. We're running out of food, we're running out of water, we're running out of air. And of course, in order to solve global problems, what kind of a government do you need? You can't get by with a state government, you can't get by with a national government. To solve global problems, you need a global government. So we are headed towards a unification of religion, military, and political thinking. It's unifying right underneath our nose. America has a recession, the whole world has a recession. This is all you hear about on the news. Now, if you actually look and think about this stuff, you're like, wait a minute, global warming? When I went to school 30 years ago, they told me that the earth was global cooling, and we were going to freeze to death in 30 years because all the heat was escaping through the ozone layer, and if we didn't stop using refrigerant, we were going to freeze into a ball of ice. Now we're saying that because I drive a Suburban and I eat an In-N-Out burger, the earth is going to cook itself because it went up 0.5 degree over the last 100 years. Then they tell us that 1,000 or 2 or 5 or 10,000 years ago there was an ice age, and I'm not really sure how many Suburbans were going around then. What caused that problem? Global terrorism, we spent how many trillions of dollars on the war on global terrorism? Anybody want to guess? I'm talking trillions, not billions. 4 trillion? Let's go with $4 trillion spent on the war on terrorism. Now, I ask yourself, how many people died last year from terrorism? Less than people died from getting hit by a lightning bolt. And how much money did we spend on lightning bolt prevention? More kids, like 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 times more people die from getting ran over when people back up their car in their garage. How much money have we spent on rear view cameras? More, but not $5 trillion. My point is that these problems are grossly exaggerated. Global financial crisis, global environmental problems, global food and global water. We're always getting the impression that we're running out of space. But yet, every time you get into a plane and you fly for hours and hours and hours, you look outside and there's nothing there. This planet is vacant. You could put the entire population of the entire world in North America, and everybody would have a ranch of, I think, like 50 acres. Every family would have a 50-acre ranch. The planet is not full. We see the pictures of where Mother Earth is sweating, and she's carrying all these people, and she's barely able to get by. And if you have more than 2.5 kids, you're looked at as a terrorist because you are putting undue strain on your mother. And when you look at it, including Israel, the most populated country you could find is what? China, India, Japan, Italy, I don't know which one, but I've flown over all of them, and every time I look down after hours and hours of traveling at 600 miles an hour, I see nothing. So I'm not really sure where this overpopulation is. It's like these environmental problems that we have where we're running out of this particular plant, and yet every time we try to build a house, that plant shows up on every single building that we have. If this thing is so rare, then why is it showing up on every piece of property we own? My point to you is that these problems, there's probably an element of truth in them, but they are grossly exaggerated. And they're grossly exaggerated for political reasons. What's going on is a unification of thought, unification of military, unification of politics, and unification of religion. Now, let's finish off with this. This is the Hitler's ID card where we said that he's 555. We didn't make that up. His social security number for his Nazi card, Adolf Hitler, see? Adolf. His number was actually 555, so I use that to remember. Now, let's keep going with this last final kingdom that Lucifer or the Satan has been trying to build, and God's always frustrating him. He's never allowing him to finish the job. Well, the Bible at the end says, you know what, for a little while, for like 7 years, he's actually going to let this kingdom go. He's actually going to let it get built. And this kingdom is described by the feet. Over here, these feet of iron and clay. So let's start looking at who potentially can these feet be. From here up, it's history. Nobody argues this. As a matter of fact, the prophet Daniel was so precise that they said that the only way that he would have known this is because he wrote the book after this happened, which is a lie. He wrote the book before these kingdoms happened. This was supernaturally revealed to him. But now we get into the prophecy. So this is where everybody starts to fight over what do these feet, what does this kingdom mean? And this is the final kingdom. This is the kingdom that the rock from heaven comes down and actually attacks. This entire structure collapses. And this is the bad guy getting attacked from a good guy. The scripture says the good guy is going to come from heaven. He's coming down. Nobody's going up. He's coming down, hits this kingdom at the feet, and the whole thing collapses. So let's look at these feet. You got the head, that was Babylon. You got the torso, which was Medo-Persia. You got the body, that was Greece. And then you got the legs that were Rome. Now notice that the Roman Empire got split into two. There's the Western Roman Empire and the East Roman Empire. Everybody follow me? There's about 1 billion people that are Eastern Orthodox. There's about 1 billion people that are Roman Catholic. This country, the countries that are part of the Western Roman Empire, eventually poured out into let's do it by military might. The biggest one, I would say, is the United States today. And then there's maybe like the UK as a toe, France, Germany, Italy, Spain. Let's leave them as the 5 toes. UK, France, Italy, Spain, Germany. This is pretty much where the Western Roman Empire has flowed into historically. Now let's look at the Eastern Roman Empire. What countries have turned into this? Well, the big, most powerful one is Russia. And then Russia's got its toes. You got Latvia, and you got Belarus, and you got the Ukraine and Romania, and maybe Bulgaria. It's got its toes too. But most of the military might on the planet today is represented by the US and its allies, Russia and its allies, and then there's another element, this thing called Islam. And notice that we got our Muslims, they got theirs. We got the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates and basically the Shiite Muslims. I'm doing the Muslims in red. The Muslims are split into Shiites and Sunnis. The Shiites tend to go with the Russians, like Iran. The Sunnis tend to go with us. They got theirs, we got ours. So you got half of Christianity over here, you got half of Christianity over here. You got half of the Muslim population here, you got half of the Muslim population here. And for some reason there's contention and there's fighting between these two parties. And it's in the news every single day, and you can cut it with a knife. We used to make movies that Russia was going to invade America, and when I went to Russia, there was movies about USA invading Russia. Everybody's going to invade everybody else. Now, the reason why Daniel cares about these empires is not how they relate to each other. The only reason why Daniel was making such a big deal about this thing is how these empires relate to Israel. Now, Israel got destroyed once by Rome. Oh, no, excuse me, the Babylonians. These guys destroyed Israel 1.0. These guys authorized the rebuilding of Temple 2. The Greeks desecrated Temple 2 on December 25th by taking a pig and sprinkling the blood all over the place on December 25th. And Rome, right here, the Iron Legs, destroys Temple 2.0. So destroy Temple 1.0, allow to rebuild, desecrate, destroy. So what's this last kingdom going to do? Well, we have Israel once again in 1948. It wasn't just In-N-Out Burger that came back or that got born. Israel gets born in a day in 1948. If we interpret these historical kingdoms in light of these prophetic kingdoms, we're going to see, and Zechariah tells us that all nations are going to gang up and try to start invading Israel. Now, who's getting caught in the middle of this fight here? The prophet Daniel says that Israel is going to be pinched in between these global empires. Now, you think, well, that's ridiculous. How can every nation get into a war with 14 million or 6-7 million Jews? Let's say the population doubles. But look at what's going on in Syria, for example. America's there and Russia's there. We don't really care. We're not really fighting. Syria is not really the fight. We don't want them to have it. They don't want us to have it. If Jerusalem ever gets in play, there's no way that the Eastern Orthodox Church is going to say, okay, we don't want it. There's no way that the Roman Church is going to say, we don't want it. The way that you're going to get the whole world involved in a universal battle over an insignificant country in the middle of nowhere is because Jerusalem is something that everybody wants. And guess what happens when you're going to have this nation invading, and the Jews are going to say, guys, we don't want anybody here. At that point, that's going to make the Jew against everyone else, kind of like the Syrians are today. Now, this is something that you only, when we hear the prophecies from the American perspective, America is always the best country in the world, and Russia and Iran are always bad. When you travel to Russia and Iran, you'll hear exactly the opposite. USA is the country of Satan, and they are the ones that are bringing peace and prosperity to the universe. So this contention, I'm trying to show you that this fight between these two superpowers, Israel is going to get caught in the middle of it. Right now, Israel is enjoying two things: their strength militarily and their relationship with the United States of America, which was exactly what God told them never to do. In the kingdom that Solomon had here, God told them, do not make deals with other nations and do not rely on your military. Use me as your defender. Trust me as your defender. Obey me as your defender, and I'll take care of your problems. Israel didn't choose to do that. They chose to use their military and their deals, and they made a deal with Babylon, and it bit them in the butt. They made a deal with Medo-Persia. They made a deal with Greece. They invited Rome in. They actually invited Rome in. Rome never conquered Israel. It was the two Jewish guys were fighting for supremacy. The left and the right were fighting, and they actually called Rome in to settle the dispute. So this relationship with the global empire, and these people had absolute military supremacy in their time. That's why think about how the prophecy of Zechariah could come to fruition when it says that all nations are going to be drawn. It's like God is, he's hooking these nations like a fish, and he's bringing them all to Jerusalem. Now, how can you do that when there's 6 billion people on earth and there's only 10 million people in Israel? And the way you do that is you set up half the world to have one flavor, the other half for the other flavor, and they both want the same thing. So picture Israel as getting stuck in the heel of these two gigantic forces that are pinching them. So now we have the character of the Messiah, the Savior of Israel. Of course, what I'm saying is that all the major world religions over here, I got them as Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, atheism, the people who don't even believe that God exists. That's a religion, that's a big one. And let's throw rabbinic Judaism in there for fun. Not that it's the size, but they are very significant. I notice it spells bicker. That's accurate. Now, what I'm seeing is that there's a common link between all these religions, even though they find that each one says, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, and the world is going to have peace when everybody else that doesn't think like me goes away. There's actually one common link in all these religions, and they preach the religion of selfishness, which is this. Now, Lucifer preaching the same religion in different ways, in different history points, but at the end of the day, the common link and the division is, how do you care about other people, and how do you care about this being that created you? Do you care about his feelings? Do you care about his pain and pleasure? And do you care about other people's pain and pleasure, or do you only care about your own? For example, a lot of those religions will make laws, but those laws are not really defined. They're not really created for the love of others or the love of Jehovah. They're created to make you feel good about you obeying them. So you create a law, you obey the law, you go up a notch. You create another law, you obey it, and you go up a notch. And eventually the idea is you get to heaven. You keep climbing your way up. And remember, God says, you're not going up, it's me that's coming down, and I'm only going to come down if and when you ask me to. This whole world is being ran in a way of a rebellious kid who ran away from home. He squandered his inheritance. We've been rebelling against our Creator for 6,000 years, and we are headed towards what, according to the prophets, we are headed towards a point of nuclear annihilation that says that if he didn't come back and cut those days short, there would be no life left on earth. Now think about it. In Genesis 1:1, the earth was a big black ball of dead ice. If we are left to our own devices 6,000 years later, we are going to bring the world to a big black ball of dead ice. It's called nuclear winter. That is where we are headed. That's where God says, if you do not have me as your king, you guys cannot govern yourselves. And if you hire Lucifer as your king, he will enslave you and make you poor and miserable, and pretty much what you've had for 6,000 years. Bubonic plague, World War I, World War II, the Dark Ages, slavery, floods, death, misery, sickness, all of which could have been avoided if we would have just listened to Daddy day one. But we said, no, we don't want to listen to Daddy, we want to do it our way. Maybe this rebelling angel knows better. So I continue the downward degeneration that we are making the same downward spiral in Millennium 4, Millennium 5, start to the Dark Ages, and now we're Millennium 6. Now, of course, everybody thinks that Millennium 6 is going to end up in peace, prosperity, and cheesecake for everybody. All world religions, the Jews are waiting for a Messiah. The Christians are waiting for their Christ. The Buddhists are waiting for their Mitra. The Muslims are waiting for a Mahdi. They are all waiting for this global world leader to come, reestablish peace and tranquility for all. Now, so the word Christ means Messiah, which means anointed one. if you equate the word Messiah with Christ, with Mahdi, and with Mitra, you will see that these religions are actually all saying the same thing. We're waiting for one good dude to come over and fix this giant mess that we've made ourselves in. So the only argument here is, who exactly is this being who we're going to submit to? Who's going to establish this unification, this global leader, this global king? The argument is the characteristics of who that person's going to be. When the Israelites came out of Israel, when Moses took the Israelites out of Egypt, Korah starts a rebellion and says, guys, Moses is not here. Let's make a golden calf, and we're going to pray to it, and we're going to thank it for taking us out of the land of Egypt. He creates another religion based on selfishness, and he gives it the title of the God that took us out of the land of Egypt. Now think of that. He didn't call it, this is Satan, let's worship him. He didn't say, this is Lucifer, let's worship him. He said, this is the God that took us out of the land of Egypt. Worship the golden cow. In so doing, the God that actually did take him out got extremely angry, made him tear it down and destroy it and eat it. However, Korah was completely convinced that what he was doing was good for the nation. So if you were a Jew, imagine you're at the bottom of that mountain. How do you know if you should follow Moses or if you should follow Korah? They're both giving you a story, kind of like Adam. How are you supposed to know if I should listen to this serpent or if I should listen to this other guy? How are you supposed to know if you were Lot, if you were supposed to follow Abraham or go to Sodom and Gomorrah and do your own thing? Fundamentally, how are we supposed to know if Jesus, who comes to the planet and claimed to be the Messiah, how are we supposed to know if he was the Jewish Messiah, or if he was an imposter, or if he was a liar, or if he was a lunatic? Everything, every characteristic, all the good guys in the faith, Joshua, David, Solomon, Elijah, Enoch, Noah, Jonah, Samson, Abraham, Isaac, there are characteristics that these people have displayed over the course of time to show you what God's character is like. And if you tune yourself to that information, you will be able to identify who's right and who's wrong. Jehovah calls himself the God of love. That's the word that he's not the God of force. He calls himself the God of love. Star Wars has the God of force. May the force be with you. But Jehovah, when he narrows it down to one word, it's love. When he narrows it down to two sentences, it's love your neighbor and love me. And then there's another verse that describes, what do you mean by love? Love is gentle, kind, long-suffering, loyal, faithful, servant, king, defender, trustworthy, strong, in control. Does this sound like anything that we did at the beginning? You see that we're all looking for this husband, this father. We innately know what a loving father and what a loving husband is. And if you notice, if you split these qualities into two, some of them are based on the soft side of your father or your husband. And some of them, like athletic, strong, are based on a more aggressive side. And this is why the New Testament describes that when God appears in the form of a human being as a Messiah, he shows up the first time in the form of a meek, humble, loyal, sacrificial. He shows up as a lamb. Why? Why does he strip himself of all of the glory, the good looks, and the money, and the strength, and the army, and his power? Why does he not show up with all of that? The Jews, as a matter of fact, rejected him specifically because he was ill-equipped. They say that we in the churches say that Jesus fulfilled all the prophecies. That is not true. Jesus fulfilled about half of them. The other half, for example, all the prophecies that are fulfilled to establish this kingdom, which is a man of war, strong, powerful, reestablishing Israel on the top of the political food chain. Can you give me the Temple Mount? Where he is going to live on this Temple Mount and rule physically from this building, well, not this building, but from this location, from this nation, through these people, he's going to establish a global galactic government. Nobody actually can even perceive of a Jewish king not only running Israel, but running the whole world. That is something that the church pictures Jesus as a soft, weak, humble lamb, and he forgives everything, he's very graceful. but he's not really a Joshua. He's not really a man of war. And of course, the Jews picture the Messiah as exactly the opposite. All they think about is the strength and the strong and the powerful and the good looks. And they want to reestablish this building. They want to rebuild a third temple and reestablish the supremacy that the nation had back over here in Solomon's time. Now notice that in the middle of this 6,000 years, God gives you a halftime show. Right in the middle of the 6,000 years, right here, you get a 40-year kingdom under Solomon. For 40 years, you get a taste of what this could be like. No war. Economic prosperity beyond recognition. Silver was so abundant, they didn't even bother to pick it up. It became a non-precious metal. They made forks out of it. That's why we call it silverware today. But ours forks aren't made out of silver. They're made out of iron because we're too poor. But Solomon had 666 talents of gold pouring into the kingdom every day. I think they estimate his wealth that he was the only trillionaire in human history. And the kingdom was prospering beyond measure. Population explosion, growth, building, peace, cheesecake, and for everybody. So for 40 years, think about it, right in the middle of the 6,000 years of basically human disobedience, he gives you a halftime show. He gets you a little whiff of, hey, this is the type of kingdom that I would like to bring you to if you obey and love and trust me. Not because you're getting paid to, not because you will fear punishment, but because you agree with my religion of love. Let's say that again. This kingdom, this being, is asking you to join him based on your free will. Not because he's going to drown you in pleasure or he's going to beat you to a pulp in pain. What he is asking, because all of those motivations are always selfish related. If the only reason why you want to go to heaven is so that I don't burn in hell for an eternity, do you see that your motivation is always me, me, me? That's fundamentally what you care about. You care about your pleasure and your pain. So if somebody comes up to you and says, if you pray 1, 2, 3, you'll go to heaven and get a mansion. You're like, wow, sounds good. I'll do that. And what happens if I don't? Well, you're going to go to hell and burn in hell for 1 billion years. That I don't want. I'll take the first one. Now, with a choice like that being who makes that decision, did he consider loving his creator? Did he consider the feelings of others? Did he consider everyone else's pleasure or pain? Did he say, hey, I need to work towards becoming an understanding, honest, loyal, patient, supportive, humble defender? Does any of this come to mind? Do you see how all he's thinking about is his needs, his wants, and you have a selfish person that came in, selfish out. So guess what happens if Jesus or God allows all these selfish people to come into the 1,000-year reign? This 1,000-year reign is going to look like these last 6,000 years. A bunch of people behaving in a selfish way, creating war, death, misery, and rebellion. So that's not what this kingdom is about. This kingdom is about where all the people who were good, the Abrahams, the Noahs, the Shems, the Enochs, the Elijahs, the Nathans, the Solomons, the Davids, all the people that were faithful and loyal to God and loved his way, not because they got paid and not because they got beat into submission. They loved his ways just because they figured out that's the way the universe should work. The universe needs to work on the principles where everybody cares about each other. You cannot have, would you rather live in a universe where only you care about your car in the parking lot? Or would you rather live in a universe where everybody cares about your car in the parking lot? The religion of love is self-sustaining. The religion of selfishness always leads to collapse and implosion. And by the way, that's why every one of these kingdoms, besides God frustrating them, and of course Lucifer says, the reason why it didn't work is because you didn't let me finish it. The reason why it didn't work is because you buried my army at the bottom of the Red Sea. The reason why it didn't work is because you did not allow me to finish it. So God's going to remove that excuse and say, fine, this last kingdom, I'm going to take my hands off, and I will allow you and mankind to do it your way, and I will bow out completely. And of course, the scriptures predicts that the end of this is going to be the verge of nuclear annihilations. There's going to be missiles flying in the air, and the verse is literally, if God did not cut those days short, there would be no life left on earth. Black ball of ice, black ball of ice. I think at this time, when missiles are flying in the air, I think humanity is going to figure out maybe we do not know how to run this planet. Maybe we've been submitting to the wrong God. We put him here as a logo with this, just because the Satanic Bible has this as its logo. Maybe we've been listening to a demonic force that does not love us. See? Now look at the way this guy looks, always dressed in black. By the way, when you go to Jerusalem, you're going to notice there's people from all these religions, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity. I don't know about atheism, but and you're going to see there's a common link between the religious leaders of all these major religions. I call them the zombies. S-O-M-B. Smelly, obese men that are dressed in black. And what I mean dressed in black, it's either a tablecloth or a drape. They all have the same uniform. And that tells you they smell. They don't really care too much about how you perceive them. They're obese. They have no self-control. They're men that you definitely don't want to put them at the top of the list for babysitting your 12-year-old. And they're always dressed in the same color. It's black. Different religions, but I'm telling you, once there's the same spirit behind it, you're going to see common links. Now, I was graceful, and I said, just because you're caught up in one of these particular faiths, let's say that, are there any loving people in the world of Buddhism or Islam or Christianity or atheists or Rabbinic Judaism? I say yes. I think that there are people who mean well. There are people who are loving. And I mean by loving, I mean that are understanding, honest, loyal. You make a contract, they honor it. There are all of these characteristics, which of course is what determines if you are a friend of this being or if you are a friend of this being. These characteristics is what decides whether you get into this kingdom or not. Those characteristics decide whether you're God's friend or not. So, we've been taught that it's your profession of faith that decides where you go. I believe in Jesus, therefore I'm saved. Really? Lucifer believes in Jesus. The demons believed in Jesus. Lots of people believed in Jesus. Doesn't mean that they loved him. Doesn't mean that they obeyed him. That's the differentiating factor. Satan believes that Jehovah exists. He talks to him all the time. The problem is not believing that he exists. The problem is, do you care about his feelings enough to obey him and trust him when he tells you to do something that makes absolutely no sense? When he tells you to take a knife and stab your son like he did to Abraham, are you going to do that? When he tells you that, I don't know, don't eat for a while and it's good for you. Fasting, good for me? That seems a little weird. He tells you to circumcise your son on the 8th day. That doesn't seem like a good idea either. He tells you a lot of things. Jesus tells you, forego your desires of this life and I'll give you eternal life. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm going to lose my life? I only got 70, 85 years on this planet, and you want me to live selflessly with a promise of getting eternal life later on? That doesn't make any sense. The guy is always asking you to trust him. He's asking you to trust him with things that make no sense. Now, is it rational for us to trust him? After 6,000 years, when everything that he said turned out to be true, every promise that he made turned out to be exactly right, every prophecy that he did so far turns out to be exactly right, I think that obeying him at this stage of the game makes a lot of sense. And disobeying and disengaging from this being also makes a lot of sense. Now, if you look at when the Bible says the road to salvation is narrow and the road to perdition is wide, the reason why I feel that the road to perdition is wide as of today is because this math is being calculated on 6,000 years of human history. And the majority of these people have chosen to be rebels. However, once we move to a physical kingdom where you have the Jewish Messiah reigning on a throne in Jerusalem, running the planet the way it should be, the population swells, let's say to 100 or 200 billion people. At this point, the advantage that evil has enjoyed for 6,000 years goes away. All these people that were punished for being righteous, they're all of a sudden the chief of staff. They're the presidents, they're the leaders of this kingdom. And all the people that were evil and powerful in this kingdom, they don't even make it here. Sin is suppressed in this kingdom. Righteousness, peace, justice, prosperity, law, order, and grace. These things are magnified once and for all. Satan, it says, he's put in prison. He's no longer allowed to operate and influence human behavior. He's actually not destroyed yet. He doesn't get destroyed until the end of the 1,000 years. And look at this. This being is so loving. He's so gentle. He's so soft that even after he's let you be a rebel for 6,000 years, and after he's shown you how nice life would have been if you would have just listened to him from the very beginning, after that, he gives mankind one further chance to say, now, make your final decision of who you will worship. And I suggest we should be like Joshua. As for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord. However, it says that a lot of people, a lot, but not the majority, of human beings are actually going to be joining Lucifer and his demonic angels in a final rebellion, and that is when it says that death, hell, and all rebels are thrown into this lake of fire. And when you're thrown into a lake of fire, you get melted down. You're gone. You're erased. It's kind of like the Terminator. If you ever watched Terminator 2 and needed to get rid of that robot because he was so bad, you put him into a lake of fire, and that's sayonara. So, the idea of eternal hell is not congruent with the Hebrew Scriptures. The idea of hell existing and then hell ceases to exist is more in line with what the book says. Now let's go back to this dad-husband character here. Let's go the other way. Give me an example of the worst possible father you could possibly imagine. The guy, he gets the girl pregnant and he leaves. Okay, he's an absentee father. How do you spell absentee? Okay. Huh? Oh, yeah. All right. So come on, give me the words of this loser dad. The guy's just he does not love his wife, does not love his kids. He doesn't even marry her. He takes off. He's selfish. Okay? He's absent. He's dishonest. He's not trustworthy. He's abusive. When he does show up, he's not loyal. By the way, it's not only just abusive in terms of pain, he's also abusive in terms of pleasure. He comes by once a year, takes the kid and drowns him in candy. The wife's like, dude, what are you doing? He lets him play the video games until 11 o'clock, until late. Drowns him in candy. He lets him do whatever he wants. He's lascivious. He's permissive. There's no limit to his grace. Understand? No law. No discipline. He doesn't discipline his kids, couldn't care less. The reason why he's nice to his kids the one time a year that he comes by is because he wants something from the kid. He's not pouring into the kid, he's getting poured from the kid. This is a selfish man. Unlimited grace. No law. Okay, now let's look at the other side. Let's look at the tyrant, the abusive type. Very strict, lots of laws, no love, no grace. He decides everything. He decides what we eat, when we eat, where we eat. Unfair, unjust. But I'm talking about an unjust where he does not consider the feelings of the wife and the feelings of the kids. He's completely sovereign, shall we say. He decides everything. There's no free will in this. Free will is not allowed to run in this house. Put the picture of Cinderella up. Cinderella's Gives me a picture of a really nasty parent. Okay? You could learn a lot from Cinderella. Nah. Okay, yeah, I guess you could give me that one. Okay, this one's even better. Remember, Cinderella had a loving dad who died, and now she's stuck with this abusive parent who, look at the characteristics that she has. She plays favorites. She loves these unconditionally, and she hates this one. No matter what she does, she can never earn her love. No matter what these girls do, they can never earn her hate. She plays favorites. She makes all of the kids feel like total losers. Notice none of those kids are happy. Notice that the good and the bad kids are miserable. She's miserable because she's a victim all the time. And these people are miserable too because there's this weird relationship. There's like codependency. They're enabling her. They don't love her. She don't love them. She's always bossing them around. They're always yelling at her. There's no love in there. Even though she's got full authority over the household, but all three of the subject feel like total losers. And then she plays favorites unconditionally. Unconditionally. Their free will does not matter. Okay? This girl is hated no matter what. These girls are loved no matter what. It's like the caste system in India. If you're at the top, you'll always be at the top. You're going to be the doctor, you're going to be the lawyer, and there's nothing that you can do to ever not be at the top. This girl, she's at the bottom. She'll always be at the bottom. Nothing she can do to ever not be at the bottom. Like the guy at the bottom end of the caste in India, when you hit him with the car, you don't even stop and pull over. You treat him pretty much like a dog. You scoot him out of the side of the road so you can continue driving. That's how much humanity we apply to the lower. So once you're in, and once you're out, you're out. Your free will has absolutely no bearing on what the God decides. Unconditionally plays favorites. Okay? There's always limited resources. What do I mean by that? This household's always they're always pinched, okay? The kingdom of this guy is plenty, rich, plenty for everybody, and your cup overfloweth. This other kingdom, under this hag, there's always a problem with money. There's enough to buy her a dress. There's enough to buy her a dress. I'm sorry, not enough to buy her a dress. There's enough to buy 2 bracelets, but not 3. There's always a limited amount of resources. Then she makes her will irresistible. How do you spell irresistible? Huh? What do I mean by she makes her will irresistible? You can't refuse her. She bribes these girls to go to the ball. She gets them the best dress, the best jewelry, hooks up them with the good-looking guys at the date. They can't even think about saying no to this invitation. She drenches them in pleasure for their obedience. This girl, exactly the opposite. Let's say that these girls were to think, Mom, I don't want to go to the dance. What do you think she would do? How would she react? Extreme violence. So she goes from extreme bribery to extreme torture. She would beat him over the head with a baseball bat for defying her authority. You are going to that dance no matter what. It is not an option, okay? Not obeying her causes you to be in torment forever. Obeying her, you're good to go. And, once again, their free will has absolutely nothing to do with it. She is always going to be at the bottom of the pile. They're always going to be at the top of the pile. I call that irresistible bribery. And the last one I use is she's very persistent. What I mean by persistent is that she's stubborn. Nothing can change her will. You can't negotiate with this woman. Whatever she decides goes. She's like a train full of lead on the railroad track. It's not derailing for anybody. Their will is like a butterfly landing on this big, heavy train going 100 miles an hour. It affects her nothing. This is what we call an obnoxious parent. Whether it's a mom or a dad, nobody wants to live under this regime. Now, why do I go through this big old deal about creating these two jerks here? Well, most of the world today is secular humanist, which means that they're atheists. You know what they're saying? What they're saying is that God does not exist. He's absent. He's not there. Basically, God does not love me. It's like a kid who runs away from home because the dad doesn't love him. And when they ask him, what's your name? He changes his name. He tries to get as far away from his jerk dad as possible. That's what the secular humanists are doing. What they're saying is that God's character is not lovable. He's a jerk. And I want to get as far away from him as possible. I'll even go to the point of saying my dad doesn't even exist. And I'll change my name. That way, I don't have to obey him. And I could basically hurt him the most I can by spitting in his face of saying, you are no longer my dad. That's pretty much half of the world. And the other half of the world believes that God is a tyrant who's strict, who has laws, and if you disobey his laws, we will put you in hell for all eternity. And you see, when you're stuck between dad, if this is dad A, and this is dad B, at the end you conclude, I hate dad. And I hope he doesn't exist, and if he does, I need to start a rebellion, actually. I need to join this guy and say, I don't trust anyone and everybody because nobody cares for my pain and pleasure under this universe. And nobody cares about me under this universe. There is no love. Both of these gods, and I vouch to say that whether we're talking about the God of Christianity, the God of Allah, the God of Buddhism, which is a spirit in the sky, ask yourself, have you or your church promoted these ideas in any way? And we're wondering why the church or the message of God, for some reason, does not stick to humanity. The message starts in Israel, it takes off northwest, goes to Asia Minor, goes to Europe, hops the pond to London, goes to the United States. Now it's coming around to China and India. But notice that after a while, it flames out. It doesn't stick. And it's because mankind is not repeating God's message of love. For some reason, we get excited, we hear God's word, and then we start listening to our old enemy, Lucifer, and we let his ideas creep back in, exactly like Israel did 3 times. And the church has done exactly the same thing. We are following that tradition of getting corrupted from within. Notice that Israel never fell from an outside attack. It was only due to an interior attack. You divide and conquer, and then you collapse it with military force. Okay, so that's the presentation, and now we wanted to open up to the objections to worldview that was on your chair. What I'm hoping is that the characteristics of the being, when I've separated this being into what a loving father, what a loving husband, what a loving creator, this being is so lovable. The question is, why don't you love him back? Why don't you obey him? You should obey him. His characteristics are beautiful. You should want to get married to him. You should want to submit to him. Mankind should want to be his bride. He's asking a relationship. He wants to be the husband. Mankind needs to be the bride. And we keep saying, no, we're not showing up to this wedding. And when you look at his character and you separate what he has done from what Lucifer or sinful humanity has done, he becomes extremely lovable and extremely desirable.